house at 704 Hauser Street was not a palace, but it was a universe. It was a fortress of familiarity, where the worn fabric of Archie Bunker's armchair held the shape of 1,000 evenings, and the faint, sweet scent of Edith's polish lingered in the air like a happy memory. To an outsider, the sounds of the house might seem like discord. Archie's booming pronouncements on the state of the world, the television's constant chatter, the clatter of pots from the kitchen. But to Archie and Edith, it was a symphony, the comfortable, predictable music of their shared life. Archie's grumbling was the bass line, a steady rumbling rhythm that Edith understood not as anger, but as his way of engaging with a world that often confused him. And her gentle, high-pitched responses were the melody atune of unwavering affection that smoothed his rough edges and always brought the song back to a key of love. The news of Aunt Rose's passing fell upon the house with a gentle quiet. Edith felt the natural pang of loss for a family member, a thread in the tapestry of her life, now snipped. She knew without question that she must go and pay her respects. She also knew that Archie would put up a fight. It was part of their dance. "I ain't going, Edith," he announced from his chair, his eyes fixed on the newspaper. "Funerals give me the creeps. All them flowers smelling up the place, people whispering. It ain't natural." Edith came and stood beside his chair, placing a light hand on his shoulder. She didn't argue or plead. She simply said, "I know, Archie. It's a hard thing, but she was my aunt, and I would feel better if you were there with me." Archie rustled his paper. He grumbled about Aunt Rose's sharp tongue, recalling how she'd called him a very common person at their wedding all those years ago, but his voice lacked its usual fire. Edith patted his shoulder. "Well," she said softly, "she was right about that. We are common people, you and me, and I've been uncommonly happy with you for 30 years. He fell silent. He lowered the newspaper and looked up at her, at the sweet, open face that had been the anchor of his life. The thought of her going to that somber place alone, standing there by herself, caused a strange ache in his chest. He folded the paper with a decisive snap. "All right, dingbat," he said, his voice gruff to hide the swell of feeling. "Go get my good suit. A man's gotta support his wife, even if it means getting creeped out by a bunch of flowers." At the funeral home, the air was still and scented with carnations. They stepped into the slumber room designated for Rose and found it empty save for the casket at the far end. A wave of sadness washed over Edith. "Oh, Archie," she whispered. Nobody came. Archie took her hand, his large, rough palm enveloping hers. "Now hold on, Edith. We're here. That ain't nobody." He led her to a small bench. They sat together in the quiet, a silent, unified front of two. And then a small miracle happened. An elderly man shuffled in, then a woman, then another couple. One by one, they approached the casket, and then they approached Edith. They didn't speak of Rose's criticisms or her sharp edges. They spoke of the time she'd shared her garden's harvest with the whole neighborhood, of the anonymous check she'd sent to a family whose house had burned down at the stray cats she fed on her porch. Archie listened, his expression slowly softening. He had only ever seen one side of the woman, the side that had judged him. But here in this quiet room, a fuller picture emerged, one of kindness and quiet strength. When the last visitor had departed, Archie stood up and walked with Edith to the casket. He looked down at the peaceful face of the woman he thought he disliked so intensely. "You know, Edith," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "one time when I was laid off from the plant, she came by the house. Said she was just dropping off a jar of pickles. When she left, there was a $50 bill on the kitchen table. She never said a word about it. I never did neither." He squeezed Edith's hand. "She was all right, your Aunt Rose." In that shared moment of grace, a decades-old resentment dissolved, replaced by a quiet shared peace. The day was not one of sorrow, but of gentle revelation. A reminder that every life and every relationship holds more than what you see on the surface. A few weeks later, the promise of a weekend fishing trip with their friends Barney and Blanche filled the house with a different kind of energy. Archie was genuinely excited. Barney was his best pal, and the thought of sitting by a lake, just the two of them, was his idea of heaven. He was also happy for Barney. He and Blanche had recently reconciled after a difficult separation, and Archie, in his own way, was rooting for them. He saw the effort Barney was making and the genuine remorse in Blanche's eyes. "I just hope she knows what a good guy she's got," Archie said to Edith as he packed his tackle box. "A fella like Barney, he deserves to be happy." The cabin was rustic and warm, filled with the scent of pine. The four of them settled in easily, the initial awkwardness melting away in the face of Edith's cheerful hospitality and Barney's infectious laugh. That evening, they decided to play a game of Monopoly. Prepared to be financially annihilated, Bunker Barney declared, rattling the dice. The game was a festival of laughter. Archie grumbled theatrically every time he landed on one of Barney's properties. Blanche, far from causing friction, was the life of the party, making outrageously bad trades and celebrating every small victory with a cheer. At one point, she was trying to convince Archie to sell her boardwalk for a pittance. "Come on, Archie, be a sport," she pleaded. "The only sport I'm being is a good sport." By not laughing in your face, he retorted, but his eyes were twinkling. Later, as the game wound down, the mood grew more reflective. Blanche looked over at Barney, her expression soft. "You know," she said, her voice quiet, "this is the most I've laughed in a year. I made a real mess of things, Barney. I know that." Barney reached across the board and took her hand. "Hey, we're here now. That's what matters." Archie cleared his throat. "Well, the man's right. You can't spend your life looking in the rearview mirror. You'll crash the car." He looked from Barney to Blanche and then to his own Edith, who was beaming at him. "You got to look at the road ahead and make sure you got the right person in the passenger seat." The fishing trip was a triumph. The men caught a respectable number of fish, and the women discovered a shared passion for birdwatching. The weekend was a testament not only to the enduring power of friendship, but to the healing grace of second chances. For Archie and Edith, it was a beautiful reflection of their own solid partnership, a quiet affirmation of the foundation they had built, strong enough to shelter not only themselves, but their friends as well. The following month, Archie's Lodge was holding its annual convention in Buffalo. He called it a caucus, a term that made it sound both official and mysterious. Edith knew it was mostly an excuse for him and his friends to act like boys again, and she was happy for him to have the chance. She packed his bag with care, tucking in an extra sweater and a photo of the two of them. "Now you behave yourself, Archie Bunker," she said, straightening his tie as he prepared to leave. "Edith, it is a high-level meeting of concerned citizens," he said with mock seriousness. "We will be deliberating on matters of national importance. Just make sure one of those matters is calling me when you get there," she smiled. The convention was, as expected, a whirlwind of good-natured fun. Archie's best friend at the lodge, Pinky Peterson, was a notorious practical joker, but his gags were always clever and never mean. This year, Pinky had decided that Archie was deserving of some special recognition. He'd been a member for over 30 years, after all. On the final night at the big banquet dinner, Pinky took the stage. "Fellas," he began, "we have one member here who has given more, complained louder, and sat in the same chair more consistently than any man I know. I'm talking, of course, about Archie Bunker." A wave of affectionate laughter filled the room. Archie, seated at his table, turned a bit red. "So we decided to do something special," Pinky continued. He called his lovely niece Maribel to the stage. She was holding a large, gaudy-looking trophy. "Archie, on behalf of all of us, for your 30 years of unwavering Archiness, we present you with the Golden Whoopee Cushion Award." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Archie was flabbergasted. He made his way to the stage, completely stunned. He took the ridiculous trophy and looked out at the sea of smiling faces at his friends, who were laughing not at him but with him. He felt a lump form in his throat. He cleared his throat and leaned into the microphone. I don't know what to say. This here is the dumbest thing I ever saw." He paused, and a grin spread across his face. "And I'm going to put it on the mantelpiece. Thanks, you guys. You're all meatheads. But you're my meatheads." He returned home the next day, not with a hangover and a guilty conscience, but with a ridiculous trophy and a heart full of warmth. He showed the award to Edith, who laughed until tears streamed down her face. He had gone away for a weekend of foolishness and come back with a tangible symbol of the deep, abiding affection of his friends. The final chapter of this happy season began as things often did, with a small domestic crisis. The television, a long-serving and much-kicked member of the family, finally gave up the ghost. The screen went dark, with a sad little pop plunging the living room into an unfamiliar silence. "Well, that's that," Archie said, staring at the blank screen. As their 30th anniversary approached, an idea began to form in Edith's mind. A brilliant, wonderful secret idea. She would buy Archie a new color television. It would be the greatest surprise of his life. The only problem was the cost. She didn't have that kind of money. But Edith was a woman of quiet determination. She gathered up her bank books, her Christmas Club account, her small savings account for their grandson, and marched down to the first friendly bank. She met with a young loan officer who looked at her application and frowned. When he saw she was a housewife with no independent income, he began to politely explain why a loan would be impossible. Just then, the branch manager, a kind-faced woman in her 50s named Mrs. Gable, happened to be walking by. She overheard the conversation and paused. "Mrs. Bunker," she asked. "Edith Bunker?" "Why, yes," Edith said, surprised. "I thought I recognized the name. You and your husband have been with this bank since we opened this branch," Mrs. Gable said with a warm smile. She looked at the application. And then at Edith. "Mr. Faraday is new here," she said, gesturing to the young officer. "He doesn't understand that the most valuable work isn't always on a pay stub. A woman who can manage a household, raise a family, and still put money aside in 3 different savings accounts is one of the most reliable and fiscally responsible people I can imagine." She turned to the stunned loan officer. "Give Mrs. Bunker the loan. Her character is all the collateral we need." Edith left the bank feeling 10 feet tall. A few days later, 2 delivery men arrived with a massive box. They set up the brand new color television just as Archie was due home from work. When he walked in and saw it, he stopped dead in his tracks. His jaw dropped. "Edith, what in the world?" "Happy anniversary, Archie," she said, her face aglow with pride and love. He was speechless. He walked over to the set, touching it as if it were a mirage. He looked at Edith, his eyes wide with disbelief. "But where did we get the money for this?" Edith took a deep breath and stood up a little straighter. "I got a loan," she said proudly. "From the bank. All by myself." Archie stared at her. For a moment, she saw a flicker of his old possessive nature, the instinct to be the one in charge of the finances. But then it was gone, replaced by something she had never seen before, pure, unadulterated awe. He saw not his dingbat wife, but a capable, intelligent, resourceful woman who had moved mountains to bring him this moment of joy. A slow smile spread across his face, a genuine crinkle-eyed smile of pure admiration. "Well, Albie," he said, shaking his head in wonder, "my Edith, a regular tycoon." He walked over to her and wrapped her in a hug, lifting her right off the floor. That evening, they sat together on the sofa, not in their usual separate chairs. They watched a movie in brilliant living color, the light from the new television dancing on their faces. Archie had his arm around Edith, holding her close. The house on Hauser Street was filled, not with the sound of a blaring television, but with a new kind of quiet, a happy, contented silence, the comfortable, peaceful rhythm of 2 people who knew without a doubt that they were home.